Hey, before we get into any of these accounts, I want you to hear one specific detail from the third story, a retired ranger, 22 years in the backcountry. He said the thing that kept him awake was not what he saw on the trail that night. It was that the voice knew the name of his dog, a name he had never written down, never mentioned on the radio, never told another soul at that posting. The dog had died 2 winters before. He transferred out of that district the following spring. He has not walked a trail after dark since. 7 accounts, all from different places, all with one thing in common: whoever or whatever it was, it already knew something it shouldn't have. The first account came in through an anonymous submission form. Names changed. Location narrowed down to a stretch of county road in the mountains of West Virginia, though the person who submitted it did not give the exact route. Said they were still not comfortable with that. The detail that convinced the person collecting these accounts that it was worth including: the spur road does not appear in the county road database. It is not on the state route index. According to every public record available, it does not exist, but the man drove it. 43 miles of it. He was in his late 20s when it happened, driving cross-state in late October, trying to cut time off a long haul. His GPS routed him from the main highway onto a state route, which fed into a 2-lane county road, which eventually narrowed further into something that was technically paved, but felt like it was deciding whether to stay that way. He had a paper map in the glove box, folded badly, the kind of fold where you can never quite get the right section facing up. And he had been consulting it at red lights before the road stopped having red lights, or intersections, or anything that confirmed another person had been through recently. He stopped at a 1-pump station to top off the tank before the road got worse. The kind of station that has a single overhead light and a coffee machine that sounds like it is processing gravel. He poured the coffee into a thermos he kept behind the passenger seat, checked the tire pressure with a gauge from the glove box, crouched down in the cold, working his way around the car. The station attendant, older man, maybe 60, wearing a jacket that had been washed enough times to lose its original color, did not make eye contact when he came in to pay. Rang it up without a word, handed back the change. He was almost to the door when the man spoke. "You want to be through Hollow Fork before it gets full dark." He turned around. The attendant was already looking back at the register, not at him. Did not add anything. Did not explain what Hollow Fork was or why darkness mattered. He looked out the window at the fog sitting low in the dip of the road and figured it was a visibility comment. The mountains around there pushed fog down into the valleys like water filling a bowl, and driving a narrow road in heavy fog after dark is genuinely dangerous. He took it as practical advice, the kind of thing a local says when they see out-of-state plates. He thanked the man and got back in the car. The road past the station was everything the map had implied. 1 lane in places, gravel shoulder that dropped off sharply on the right side, no guardrail for long stretches. The kind of road where you slow down not because of speed limits, but because of basic physics. His headlights hit the fog and bounced back white, cutting his visibility to maybe 30 yards. The radio had dropped to static 20 minutes earlier. His phone showed no bars. He kept one hand on the wheel and one eye on the shoulder, watching for the edge. He passed a hand-painted sign nailed to a fence post. Hollow Fork. 4 MI. And then, maybe a quarter-mile further, a second sign with the same style lettering. But the name had been crossed out in black spray paint. He did not stop to read whether there was anything written underneath. The road was too narrow, the shoulder too unreliable, and he was trying to keep moving. According to the map, Hollow Fork was a short stretch. 4 miles in, maybe 2 through, Then the road opened back up to a larger county route on the other side. 20 minutes at the speed he was driving, maybe 25. He checked the clock when he passed the first sign. 40 minutes later, the road was still going. He told himself mountain roads lie. What looks like 4 miles on paper can feel like 10 when you are driving it in fog on a narrow one lane. The curves alone can double your time. He had driven roads like this before, in the dark, in worse weather. He kept moving. He passed the yellow mile marker the first time and did not think anything of it. Just a number painted on a post. The kind highway departments put up every so often on rural routes to help emergency services find locations. He registered it the way you register most things on a dark road, without really seeing it, just processing that it was there. He passed it again 20 minutes later. He slowed down, looked at the number, looked at the road ahead. The fog had thickened enough that his headlights were mostly just illuminating a wall of white with a thin black strip of asphalt at the bottom. He told himself it was a different marker. Same style, same paint color, different number that he had misread the first time. Mountain roads repeated the same hardware all the way through. Fence posts, mile markers, the same style of rusted gate appearing every few miles on family properties. He had probably just misread it. He kept driving. The road curved to left, steep uphill, then dropped sharply back down into a fold in the mountain. According to the map, this was where Hollow Fork should have been opening up, the road widening, a junction sign appearing, the county route picking back up on the other side. He had been expecting it for the last 15 minutes. It did not appear. The road stayed narrow. The fog stayed heavy. The drop on the right side stayed guardrail-free. He had been driving for over an hour on a road that should have taken 20 minutes. He did not panic. He was careful about that detail in the submission. He said he did not panic. He just got very quiet inside his own head. He turned the radio off, even though it was already static, because having it on felt like noise he could not afford. He opened the window a crack, the cold air coming in sharp and damp, and he listened to the sound of his own tires on the road. That was when he came around a long curve and his headlights caught the figure. Male, tall, standing on the left shoulder of the road, which out here was barely a shoulder at all, just a few feet of gravel before the slope started rising into the trees. The figure was wearing dark clothing, no reflective gear, no flashlight, standing completely still, not facing the road, not flagging him down, not turned toward the oncoming headlights the way a person instinctively turns when they hear a car coming on a dark road. He slowed almost to a stop. The figure did not move, did not react to the headlights, just stood there facing uphill into the dark tree line, arms at his sides. He drove past, slow, watching in the rear view. The figure did not turn to watch him go. Most people turn. Even if you're just standing on the side of a road minding your own business, when a car passes within 10 feet of you in the dark, you turn to look. It is involuntary. This figure did not move at all. Just stood there, already facing the slope again, as if the car had not happened. The rear view showed the figure until the next bend took it away. He thought about the attendant's words. Before it gets full dark. It was full dark now. The road was still going. He was out of practical options. The shoulder was too narrow to turn around safely. Reversing on a blind mountain road in heavy fog was a way to go off the edge, and he had no signal to call anyone. The only choice was forward. He pressed the gas a little more, took the curves carefully, watched the road. He rounded one more long curve and his headlights hit the one-pump station. Same station, same overhead light, same attendant standing under the awning with his arms crossed, looking at the road. Not surprised. not alarmed, just standing there the way a man stands when he has been waiting for something he expected. He pulled in, sat in the car for a moment, looked at the odometer. 43 miles since the station. He had driven 43 miles and ended up exactly where he started. He got out. The attendant watched him cross the gravel. "You went up past the sign," the man said. Not a question. He said he had. Said the road just kept going. Said it didn't open up the way the map showed. The attendant looked at him for a moment, then looked back at the road. "I told you to be through before dark." Another pause. Then, "Nobody drives that road at night?" He asked why. Asked what was up there. Asked about the figure he had seen on the shoulder. The attendant didn't answer any of those questions directly. He went inside, came back out with a hand-drawn map on the back of a receipt. A different route, paved, adding about 15 miles to his drive. He handed it over and said, "Take that one. Don't stop on it." He took the route. He did not stop on it. He was through the mountains and on a 4-lane highway before midnight, and he drove the rest of the way with the radio off and the window cracked because the cold air helped him stay awake and not think. He checked the county road database when he got home. He checked the state route index. He checked 2 different mapping platforms and 1 historical road archive for that part of West Virginia. The spur road, the one he had driven for 43 miles and ended up back where he started, does not appear in any of them. There is no record of it. The road, where the map shows a through route, has a small notation on one of the historical scans, a faint penciled line that does not connect on either end, like someone started drawing it and stopped. The detail he included at the end of his submission, the one he said bothered him more than anything else. The figure on the shoulder was standing on the left side of the road, facing uphill. The station is downhill, at the base of the mountain. Whatever was standing on that shoulder was not watching traffic come in from the valley. It was watching the road going further up. It was facing whatever was deeper in Hollow Fork, and it was standing still, the way something stands still when it is not afraid of the dark. He drives that stretch of interstate now when he makes the cross-state trip. Adds 40 minutes to the drive. He has not used a paper map since, which he acknowledges is not a rational response to what happened, but he has not been able to make himself unfold one in the car. He says the sound of paper unfolding in a quiet vehicle bothers him in a way he cannot fully articulate. He submitted the account 3 years after it happened. Said he spent those 3 years assuming he would eventually come up with a reasonable explanation. He never did. The road is still not on any map he can find. The attendant is not findable either. The property where the station stood shows as an unoccupied lot on the current county parcel map. The sign with the name crossed out in spray paint. He said he wished he had stopped to read it. He wishes that less now than he used to. The next account does not come from a stranger driving through unfamiliar territory. It comes from a family, from a daughter, now in her 40s, telling a story about her father that she has told exactly twice in her life. Once to the person collecting these accounts, and once to her own daughter, when her daughter was old enough to understand why they do not walk the wood line behind the house after dark. Her father's name was Roy. He was a practical man. He knew those hills the way most people know their own kitchen, by feel in the dark, without having to think about it. He went up to the family land that fall the same way he had gone every fall for 15 years. He came home 2 days early. He never explained why, not completely, not until she was old enough to ask the right question. And even then, what he told her was not an explanation. It was just the one detail he had never been able to set down. Roy left on a Thursday morning in the second week of October. She was 12 years old, and she remembers standing on the porch watching the truck back down the driveway, the tailgate down. Pickett already in the bed with his nose working the cold air. Pickett was a liver-colored hound with one ear that never quite stood upright, and he had been Roy's dog since before she was born. The two of them had been up to that ridge every fall since she could remember. It was as ordinary as the season changing. She remembers what her father packed because she helped carry some of it out. The orange vest, folded neat. The thermos, same green thermos every year. 2 boxes of shells in a paper bag. The sandwiches her mother made the night before, wrapped in wax paper and put in the cooler with 2 cans of soda. Pickett's water bowl, the blue enamel one with the chip on the rim. Roy waved once from the window of the truck, and that was that. She expected him back Sunday evening. He was home Friday night. He did not say much when he came in, put his gear in the usual place, ate dinner, asked about school. Her mother did not push him. She said later that she knew something had happened by the way he moved through the house that evening, carefully, like a man who had pulled a muscle he was not going to admit to. Pickett stayed close to him all night, which was not unusual, but he would not go to his normal spot by the back door. He slept in the hallway, which he had never done before, facing the front of the house. Roy did not talk about the trip for years. According to the account his daughter gave, the first day and night on the ridge were completely normal. Roy made camp at the same spot he always used, a flat clearing just below the ridgeline with a good view down 2 hollows and a fire ring he had built himself years back. He got the fire going, ate, slept well. The second morning he was up before light, the way he always was. Pickett was ranging ahead of him on the trail by the time the sky started going gray. The second morning was when Pickett stopped working. Not slowing down, not getting distracted. Stopped. Came back to Roy's heels and would not leave them. Roy tried running him on a scent he had been tracking the previous evening. A good trail, clear enough that even Roy could see the sign. Pickett went 3 steps and came back. Circled Roy's legs, sat down. Roy tried again. Same result, he assumed bobcat. He had seen Pickett pull up short on bobcat scent before. Not often, but it happened. Big cats could make a dog reconsider. He tied Pickett to the stake at camp and went on alone, which he had done before on that land without incident. The hollow below the North Ridge was a place Roy knew well. He had been down in it probably 30 times over the years. Good deer country, thick with cover, a small creek running through the bottom that never fully dried up even in a dry summer. He was working his way along the upper edge of the ridge, glassing down into it, when he heard the sound. He described it to his daughter as a man calling for help, but wrong. That was his exact phrasing. A man calling for help, but wrong. She said she pressed him on what wrong meant, and he thought about it for a moment and said, the timing. The rhythm was off. Like someone had heard the sound once and was repeating it from memory rather than making it from need. Same word each time. Same pause between. Same volume, which was the part that bothered him most. A person calling for help gets louder when they don't get an answer. This sound did not get louder. It just repeated. Steady, like a metronome from somewhere down in the hollow he knew. He started down toward it. He said later that it did not occur to him to be afraid of it. He was a practical man on land he knew. And the practical response to a person in distress in a hollow you know well is to go toward them. He was maybe 50 yards down the slope, moving through the scrub oak, when something made him stop. He could not say what. He said it was not a sound, and it was not a sight. It was more like a pressure, a sudden awareness of something wrong that he could not name. He stood on the slope with one hand on a tree trunk and listened. The sound continued below. Same word, same pause, same volume. And then Pickett tied at camp on the ridge above him, started screaming, not barking. Screaming is the word his daughter used, and she said her father used it too. A hound can make a sound under extreme distress that does not sound like barking at all, and Pickett was making that sound from the ridge above while the rhythmic voice continued in the hollow below, and Roy stood between them on the slope and made a decision. He went back up. He came back into camp at a run and found the stake pulled clean out of the ground. Pickett had hit the end of his lead hard enough to pull a steel stake out of mountain soil, which Roy said he would not have believed was possible if he had not seen the hole it left. The dog was under the truck, not beside it, not behind it, under it, pressed flat against the frame, as far from the edge of the camp as the truck's undercarriage would allow. Roy got down on his hands and knees in the dirt and talked to him. Pickett was shaking. Not the way a dog shakes when it is cold. Roy knew that shake. This was different. He coaxed him out eventually, got him by the collar, held him against his own chest for a while, the way you hold a dog that has been through something. Pickett pressed his nose into Roy's jacket and did not lift his head. The sound from the hollow had stopped. Roy built the fire up bigger than he needed it, and sat with Pickett beside him and did not eat dinner. He listened. The hollow below the ridge was completely quiet in a way that Roy said was not natural. Quiet. Natural quiet still has texture. Insects, water, the occasional branch settling, the distant sound of something moving in leaves. What settled over that ridge after dark was a different thing. It was the absence of texture, like the hollow had been emptied out. No creek sounds, even though the creek was there year-round. No owls, nothing. Just the fire and Pickett's breathing, and the dark pressing in at the edge of the light. His father had told him something once, sitting on a porch in the same hills, when Roy was young enough that he filed it away without fully understanding it. He repeated it to his daughter years later, and she repeated it to the person collecting this account. If a dog stops barking at something in the woods, that is not a good sign. Dogs bark at what they can understand. When they stop, it means they have moved past understanding into something else. Pickett had stopped barking before Roy even got back to camp. Around 2 a.m, the footsteps started. Not in the hollow below, on the ridge above camp. Moving along the ridgeline, up where the trees thinned out against the sky. Slow and deliberate, the sound of something that was not trying to be quiet but was not rushing either. Moving with a kind of patience. Roy put the fire out, did it fast, dirt on the coals, and then he was sitting in complete darkness with the rifle across his knees, and Pickett pressed against his leg so hard Roy said he could feel the dog's heartbeat through his jeans. He did not turn on a flashlight. He did not call out. The footsteps moved along the ridgeline above and then stopped. Just stopped, mid-stride, the way a sound stops when whoever is making it has reached the place they were heading. Roy sat in the dark and breathed as quietly as he could manage. Pickett did not make a sound. Not a growl, not a whine, nothing. The dog was absolutely still against his legs, which Roy said was more frightening than anything the dog might have done. Pickett was a hound. Hounds do not go quiet. They are not built for it. The silence lasted a long time. Then, from directly above camp, Roy estimated 30 yards uphill, in the direction the footsteps had stopped, a voice said his name. Roy. Just that. Once. Quiet enough that he might have questioned whether he heard it at all, except that Pickett flinched at the same moment. A full-body flinch like a dog that has been hit, and Roy knew then that he had heard it too. The voice was his brother's voice. His brother Daniel, who had died 4 years earlier of a heart attack at 51 years old, sitting in a chair in his own living room in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. Roy had identified the body. He knew what Daniel sounded like. He had heard that voice his entire life, and he was hearing it now from 30 yards up a dark ridge in the second week of October, saying his name once in the dark. He did not answer. He sat with the rifle across his knees and one hand on Pickett's back, and he did not answer. And whatever was up there on the ridge did not speak again. He did not sleep. He kept the fire out. He sat until the sky started to go pale gray over the eastern ridge, and then he broke camp in the half-dark, moving fast and quiet, loading the truck without using a lantern. Pickett got in without being told. Roy drove down the mountain and was on the paved road before the full sunrise. He never went back up. The family land sat for several more years before they sold it. His daughter said there was never a formal discussion about selling. Her father simply mentioned one evening at dinner that he had called about putting the property on the market, and her mother nodded, and that was the end of it. She was older by then, maybe 20, and she did not ask why until she was in her 30s. She asked him directly, "Why did you sell the land?" He told her the story then, not all of it. The parts he told her were the parts included here. When he got to the voice on the ridge, he stopped for a moment and looked at his hands, and then he said, "Something up there knew your uncle's voice. I don't know how, but it did." He did not offer a theory. He was not a man who offered theories about things he could not explain. He just stated the fact and left it there, and she said that was more unsettling than any explanation he might have given, because her father was a man who explained things. He fixed engines, he read weather, he knew land. The fact that he had looked at this event for years and come up with nothing was its own kind of answer. Pickett lived 11 more years after that trip. He never approached the woods behind their house again. He would walk to the edge of the yard, not the property line, just the edge of the mowed grass, where the longer growth started, and stop. Stand there stiff-legged for a moment, facing the tree line, then turn around and go back to the porch. Every time, without variation, for 11 years. Until he was too old to make the walk to the edge of the yard anymore. And then, he would just sit on the porch and face the trees from there. She still lives in that part of Kentucky. Not on the family land, that was sold, but nearby. She looked at the hollow Roy was walking toward when he stopped on the slope, the one the rhythmic voice was coming from. She looked at it on a topographic map, the kind with the detail lines that show terrain and drainage. The hollow is there. The creek is marked, but there is no trail into it, no marked access of any kind. She checked historical maps going back several decades. There has never been a marked trail into that hollow. Whatever was down there calling in that steady, patient rhythm, there was no official path to reach it. No path out either. The next account does not come from a hunter or a family memory. It comes from someone whose job required him to go back, even when everything in him said not to. He had been at that posting for 6 years when it happened. 6 years on the same district, the same trails, the same seasonal rhythms of damage and repair, closure and reopening. He knew which creek crossings flooded first in a hard rain, and which north-facing slopes held ice 3 weeks after the valley thawed. He knew where the bears denned and where the turkey roosted, and which unofficial paths the locals used that never appeared on the public map. He was not the kind of man who startled easily. That is not a boast, it is relevant, because when a man like that transfers out of a district he has worked for 6 years, in the middle of a spring, without a promotion or a family reason or any explanation his colleagues could identify, that means something. He has not walked a trail after dark since. His name is not included here at his request. The account came through a friend who said he had never told it to more than 2 people, and had asked that it not be attached to his name or his district. Those conditions are honored. What follows is the account as it was relayed, with no details added and none removed except the specific trail name and the specific district identifier. It was early spring. The kind of early spring that looks like winter from a distance, but smells different up close. The ice pulling back from the creek banks, the mud season starting, a particular quality of cold that has stopped being aggressive and started just being stubborn. He had been waiting out the winter to get back on a ridge trail in the northern section of his district, a trail that had been closed since November due to ice damage on the switchback section. Standard post-winter assessment work. He had done it on this trail 3 times before over his 6 years at the posting. It was on his schedule. He brought his dog, a shepherd mix named Arlo, 5 years old that spring, a dog he had raised from 8 weeks and taken on trail assessments a handful of times when the work was solo and the terrain was remote enough that having another set of senses seemed practical. Arlo was good in the field. Not a trained search dog, just a well-behaved animal with good instincts and the sense to stay close when the terrain was uncertain. He signed out at the station, noted the trail name and the estimated return time in the log, and drove to the trailhead. No other vehicles in the lot. The morning was clear and cold, still some snow in the north-facing shadows where the sun had not reached it yet, the kind of granular old snow that has been there long enough to develop a crust. He clipped his radio to his shoulder strap, picked up his clipboard with the trail log and damage assessment form, shouldered his pack, and started up. Arlo ranged ahead the way he always did, not far, 20 or 30 yards, always checking back. The trail was in reasonable shape on the lower section. Some debris, a few places where water had cut across the path and left a channel that would need filling, nothing that warranted immediate closure. He made his notes, photographed the worst spots, moved steadily uphill. 2 miles up, Arlo stopped. He had seen the dog stop on trail before, usually at a scent, nose down, then up, reading the air. This was not that. Arlo stopped with all 4 feet square on the ground, ears forward and rigid, tail low and straight back. Not a hunting posture, something else. The rangers stopped too and stood still and listened. The trail was quiet. Wind in the upper canopy, the distant sound of the creek below, nothing unusual. He waited. Arlo did not resume. He took 2 steps backward, which the ranger said he had never seen the dog do on trail, and then circled behind the ranger's legs and stood there. He noted it in the trail log. Dog hesitation, possible predator sign, resumed trail. He assumed bear. Early spring, bears moving. A bear sent in the right conditions could stop a dog cold. He had seen it before. He told Arlo to heel, and they moved on. At the creek crossing at the base of the switchbacks, he found the prints. The mud bank on the far side of the crossing had a section that had dried unevenly, some of it still soft, some of it crusted over. The prints were in the soft section, large, deep, which meant whatever made them had significant weight behind it. He crouched down and looked at them carefully, the way a person looks at something they are trying to fit into a category they already have. They were not quite right for bear. The toe spread was wrong, too elongated, and the depth was inconsistent in a way that suggested a different distribution of weight than a bear's rolling gait. He photographed them from 3 angles, made a note, could not place them with certainty and did not try to. He crossed the creek and continued up the switchbacks. Near the top, where the switchbacks leveled out onto the ridge proper, the trail split at a junction. Left fork was the closed section. He could see his own closure sign from November still in place, the orange laminated card on the wire frame he had staked into the ground himself. Right fork was the main trail continuing along the ridge, which was the direction his assessment was taking him. He stopped at the junction and looked at the closure sign. The sign was there. The wire frame was there. The orange card was there, facing the correct direction, legible from 10 feet away. The flagging tape was gone. He had tied bright orange flagging tape to the top of the wire frame when he closed the trail in November. A standard practice, a visual reinforcement of the closure that could be seen from further down the trail. The tape was not on the frame. It was not on the ground around the frame. It was not caught in the nearby brush. It was simply gone, as if it had been removed deliberately and taken away. He stood at the junction and looked up the closed fork. The trail curved uphill and disappeared into the trees within 40 yards. He could not see past that curve. Arlo stood beside him and did not move toward either fork. The ranger made a note, flagging tape missing from closure marker, possible vandalism or wildlife interference, and continued right on the main trail. He had gone perhaps 200 yards past the junction when something called Arlo's name. He stopped walking. The sound had come from behind him and to the left, from the closed fork, from uphill on the closed fork, past the curve where the trail disappeared into the trees. It had said Arlo, not a sound that resembled the name, not a bird call or a trick of wind through branches that the brain assembles into something familiar. The word, clearly, once. Arlo had stopped the moment the ranger stopped. The dog was standing beside his left leg, and he had not moved toward the sound, had not lifted his head toward it, had not made any sound of his own. He just stood there, and the ranger stood there, and neither of them moved. The ranger later said that the thing that hit him first was not fear. It was confusion. The trail had been closed since November. He had signed in as the only vehicle at the trailhead that morning. Nobody should have been on that fork, and yet somebody up there knew the name of his dog. He ran through the possibilities fast. Another ranger, a trail volunteer, someone who had seen him at the trailhead, someone who had heard him use the name on the way up. All of those required a person who had gotten onto the closed fork without a vehicle, without passing him on the trail, and who was now standing past the curve out of sight and calling his dog by name instead of identifying themselves. He called out, identified himself by district and position, said he was conducting a trail assessment, and asked whoever was on the closed trail to come down to the junction. Nothing. He waited. He counted the seconds because he said he needed something concrete to do with his mind. He got to 90. The forest held its quiet. Then the voice said it again. Arlo. Same direction, same distance. As if it had not heard him call out at all, as if his presence on the trail was entirely beside the point. The voice was not calling to him. It was calling to the dog, and only to the dog, and it was doing so with a patience that did not suggest urgency or distress or any ordinary human reason for being on a closed trail in early spring calling a stranger's dog by name. Arlo did not move. That was the detail the ranger returned to in the account more than once. Arlo always responded to his name. Every single time, without exception, the dog's head came up and he oriented toward the sound. It was not training. It was just the way the dog was built. His name produced a physical response, automatic and immediate. Standing on that trail with the voice coming from the closed fork above, Arlo did not move, did not lift his head, stayed pressed against the ranger's leg with his ears flat and his tail low. The dog knew it was not his name being said. That is the only explanation the ranger could arrive at. Whatever was saying the word up on that closed trail was producing the right sounds in the right order, but something about it was wrong enough that the dog understood it was not the real thing. Animals know, he said in the account. Arlo knew it wasn't me calling him. He already knew. The ranger made a decision. Protocol required him to check the closed trail if there was evidence of unauthorized access. The missing flagging tape was evidence. The voice was evidence. He told Arlo to heel and started up the closed fork. The trail was overgrown with a winter's worth of uncleared debris. Branches down across the path, dead leaves packed into the low spots, one section where ice melt had undercut the edge of the trail and left a soft, crumbling drop-off on the downhill side. He moved carefully. 40 yards up, just past the curve where the trail had disappeared from the junction, he found his flagging tape. It was tied to a branch at head height. Not the branch he had tied it to in November. That branch was at the junction below, on the closure sign frame. This branch was 40 yards up the closed fork, on a hemlock that overhung the left side of the trail. The tape was tied neatly, not wound around the branch the casual way someone might wrap tape in the field. Tied. A proper knot, the kind you tie when you mean for it to stay, and it was tied in a bow. His tape, his color, his district's standard orange. Tied in a bow on a branch 40 yards up a trail he had not walked that morning, by something that had been up there while he was walking the other direction. He stood under that branch for a moment and looked at the tape and then looked up the trail. It continued uphill past the hemlock, still curving, still going. He could not see far. He listened. The forest above was quiet. No footsteps, no movement, no sound of anything retreating. He unclipped his radio and called the station. He reported a possible unauthorized visitor on the closed fork, gave his location, asked for a callback to confirm receipt. The radio returned static, not the broken signal static of a dead zone, the kind that cuts in and out, steady static, the kind that means nothing is getting through in either direction. He tried twice more, static each time. Then the radio said his name. Not from the station. The ranger was clear about this in the account. He had worked that radio for 6 years. He knew exactly what station transmission sounded like. The background hiss and the slight compression of the signal, and the way voices came through with that particular flatness that radio gives everything. This was not that. His name came through the speaker the way a voice comes through when someone is standing close to the receiving end of an open channel. Clear, present. His first name, not his call sign, not his title. The name his mother gave him. He did not respond. He turned around and walked back down the closed fork to the junction, and then down the main trail to the trailhead without stopping. He did not run. He said he made a conscious decision not to run, partly because the trail conditions made running dangerous, and partly because he felt, without being able to explain why, that running would constitute a kind of answer. He walked at a pace that was fast enough to cover ground and controlled enough that he was watching his footing and watching Arlo and not looking back up the trail. Arlo stayed at his heel the entire way down. Did not range ahead, did not investigate anything at the creek crossing. Stepped through the water and kept moving. He filed the assessment report that afternoon. Unauthorized access to closed trail, possible vandalism of closure signage, unidentified prints at creek crossing, radio malfunction during assessment. He attached his photographs, the prints, the closure sign without tape, the tape on the hemlock branch. He wrote it in the flat professional language of a field report, because that was the language available to him, and because he did not know how to write the other parts in any language that would belong in an official document. The district supervisor closed the trail for an additional 6 weeks and signed off on the report without questions. No follow-up about the flagging tape, no follow-up about the radio malfunction. The ranger said he expected at least a question about the prints. Unidentified large prints at a creek crossing were the kind of thing that usually generated a note, a request for additional documentation, something. Nothing came. He found out later, through the kind of sideways conversation that happens between colleagues in small offices, that the supervisor had worked that same district years earlier, before his current posting. He had never mentioned it. And when the ranger tried once, carefully to bring up the closed trail in conversation. The supervisor had looked at him for a moment and then looked away and said he thought the drainage report from the lower section needed updating. He already seemed to know. The ranger transferred out of that district the following spring. He cited a personal preference for a different terrain type, which is the kind of reason that cannot be questioned. He still works in the service. He does not say the trail's name out loud. He said in the account that the thing that stays with him is not the voice on the radio. It is Arlo, standing on the trail with his ears flat, not moving toward his own name. He has thought about that moment more times than he can count. A dog that loves his name. A dog that has heard it 10,000 times and always turned toward it. Standing still while something said it wrong. Arlo is 11 now. He still goes on trail assessments with the ranger at the new district. He is slower than he was, stiff in the mornings, the way old dogs get. But he still stops sometimes on the trail, all 4 feet square, ears rigid, tail low. Always facing uphill. Always the same posture. The ranger stops when he does, and they both stand still for a moment and listen, and then Arlo moves on, and the ranger moves on. The ranger does not make notes about it anymore. He knows what the posture means. He just waits for it to pass. What the ranger experienced could, in theory, be explained. An unusual visitor. An echo effect from the terrain. A stress event after a long winter season and a difficult assessment. The radio malfunction has a dozen technical explanations. The flagging tape could have been moved by an animal, by wind, by a hiker who did not understand what they were doing. The voice that said his name could have been a misheard transmission fragment. All of those explanations exist, and none of them fully hold when you put them next to each other and look at what they require you to believe simultaneously. The next account is harder to dismiss, because 2 people experienced it at the same time, at opposite ends of the same trail, and neither one knew the other had called for help. They had done this trail before. That is the first thing to understand. It was not unfamiliar terrain, not a new route they were trying for the first time on an impulse. They had walked this particular loop twice in the previous 3 years, once in early fall, once in late spring, and both times without incident. 12 miles of ridge trail in western North Carolina, moderate elevation gain, well-maintained, well-marked, with a 3-sided shelter at the halfway point where through hikers sometimes stayed overnight. They knew the shelter. They had eaten lunch there before. They knew where the trail split and where it rejoined, and roughly how long each section took at their pace. She was the more experienced hiker. She had been doing backcountry routes since her early 20s, had the gear dialed in, knew how to read weather and terrain, and the particular kind of fatigue that makes people make bad decisions on trail. He was competent, but he deferred to her on navigation and pacing, which was a reasonable arrangement that had worked well on a dozen previous trips. They were in their late 30s. They had been married long enough that they had stopped narrating everything to each other and had settled into the comfortable silence of people who know each other's hiking pace by sound. They started early, before 7, to give themselves time on the back half of the loop. The sky at the trailhead was clear and cold, the kind of October morning that makes the light look sharp and the colors look almost artificial. He photographed the valley view from the first overlook. She checked the time and said they were making good pace. They signed the trailhead register, their names, the date, their planned route and return time, and kept moving. The fog started coming up from the valley around 10. Not unusual for that terrain. The valleys in that part of the mountains hold cold air and moisture, and sometimes push it uphill as the temperature differential changes through the morning. She had seen it before on this trail. She noted it and adjusted her pace slightly, wanting to be through the exposed ridgeline section before visibility dropped too far. They made it to the shelter at the halfway point with the fog still below the ridge, which felt like good timing. He ate while she looked at the shelter register. A shelter register is different from a trailhead register. The trailhead register is official, a logbook in a wooden box, maintained by the Park Service, used to track who is on trail in case of emergency. A shelter register is informal, a notebook left in the shelter by some early hiker years ago, passed on when it fills up, a running record of whoever has stopped there. People write whatever they want: trail conditions, weather reports, jokes, complaints about their feet, the occasional piece of trail philosophy that reads better at mile 6 than it does anywhere else. She had read shelter registers on dozens of trails. They were usually entertaining in a low-key way. She found the torn page near the back of the current notebook. Not a missing page, the page was still there, still bound in at the left edge. But someone had torn it partway across, maybe a third of the way down from the top, and then smoothed the remaining bottom portion back flat. The tear was old enough that the edges had softened. Whatever had been on the torn section was gone. The bottom portion that remained was blank, but on the page before the tear, the last full entry before the damaged one, the final line read, "If you hear someone calling from the east slope," and then the torn section took the rest of it. She showed it to him. They both looked at it for a moment. He said it was probably someone being dramatic, the kind of thing people write in shelter registers to spook the next hiker through. She agreed. The fog was thickening outside the shelter opening, coming up over the ridge now, softening the edges of the trees. They finished eating, packed up, and left. The trail split 200 yards past the shelter, the loop dividing cleanly at a signed junction. Left fork continued along the main ridge toward the rejoining point. Right fork dropped slightly to traverse the east-facing slope before climbing back up to meet the left fork about 2 miles ahead. Both were well marked. They had taken the left fork both previous times. She took the left fork because the footing was better in fog. The left fork stayed on the ridge proper, which was drier and more defined underfoot. He took the right fork because he had a work reason to check the east-facing overlook, something related to a survey he was doing for a client, a matter of confirming sightlines to a landmark he could see from that exposure. It was a 5-minute detour that he had been planning since before the trip. They had discussed it that morning. They agreed to meet where the loop rejoined, which they estimated at 40 minutes from the junction at their normal pace. They had split up on trails before. It was a practical decision, not a careless one. She reached the rejoining point in 38 minutes. He was not there. She was not immediately worried. Trails in fog take longer than trails in clear weather. He might have misjudged the time on the east-facing section, which she knew from previous experience was slightly longer than it looked on the map. She waited 5 minutes, called his name. Her voice went flat in the fog, absorbed before it could carry far. She called again. From below her, down the east slope, she heard him answer. Faint. The distance made it hard to be certain, but it was his voice, she was sure of it, the particular quality of it, the cadence. And there was something in it that did not sound right. Not panic, but close to it. The kind of voice that is trying to stay calm and not fully succeeding. She called back, told him she was at the rejoining point. The voice came again from below, from the slope, and this time it sounded like her name. Just her name, coming up through the fog from the east slope. She started down toward it. The fog on the east slope was the thickest she had encountered all day. Within 20 yards of leaving the main trail, she had lost the path entirely and and was navigating by the angle of the slope, moving downhill carefully, calling his name every 30 seconds, and hearing, faintly, something that might have been an answer. The trees were close together on that slope. The ground was wet. She moved for what felt like 10 minutes and found nothing. No trail, no sign of him, no sign of anyone. She stopped, called his name again. The voice came from above her, from uphill, from where the main trail was, which meant it had moved while she was descending, or it had never been below her at all. She stood on the wet slope in the fog and did not move for a moment. Then she turned around and climbed back up, following the slope angle, until she found the ridge fence, a short section of old wooden split rail that marked the trail boundary, and got herself back on the main path. She walked back to the shelter, moving fast, staying on the trail, not calling out anymore. He was already there. He had arrived at the shelter maybe 3 minutes before she did. He was sitting on the bench inside with his pack-off and his water bottle in his hand. And when she came through the shelter opening, he looked at her with an expression she described as the same one she imagined she was wearing. Relief and something else underneath it that neither of them had a word for yet. They compared stories sitting in that shelter with the fog pressing against the opening and the light going flat outside. His account of the 40 minutes on the right fork was this. He checked the overlook, got what he needed for the survey, and made the rejoining point in what he estimated as 35 minutes. She was not there. He waited, called her name. From below him, from the west slope, the opposite slope from the one she had descended, he heard her voice. Faint, with that quality in it that he said sounded like she was trying to stay calm. He called back. Her name came again from below, from the west slope, which made no sense because she had taken the left fork which stayed on the ridge and should not have put her on any slope at all. He went down after it. The west slope was steep and wet, and he lost the trail within 30 yards. He moved downhill through the fog, calling her name, and hearing, at intervals, something that sounded like a response, not words, just a sound that had the shape of a voice. He went down for what he thought was about 10 minutes, found nothing. The voice, or the sound like a voice, seemed to relocate each time he got close to where he thought it was coming from. Always a little further down, always a little to one side. He stopped when he realized the slope was getting steeper and the fog was getting thicker, and he had no idea exactly where he was relative to the trail. He turned around and climbed back up and found the ridge fence and followed it back to the shelter. They sat with this for a while. She had gone down the east slope. He had gone down the west slope. Both of them had heard the other's voice from the wrong direction at the wrong time. Both of them had followed it downhill into fog and found nothing. Both of them had come back when the situation stopped making sense and made their way back to the shelter independently. The detail that did not match between the two accounts was small, but neither of them could explain it away. When she turned around on the east slope and started back up, she heard the voice one more time. From above her, from the direction of the main trail, her name, once. She had assumed it was him, that he had come to the rejoining point and was calling down for her. That was why she had moved quickly. She thought he was just above her. When he turned around on the west slope and started back up, the voice stopped. Not another call, not a fade, just stopped, the way a sound stops when whatever is making it makes a decision. No third call. Silence. She heard a third call. He did not. They were on opposite slopes, out of sight of each other, separated by a ridge and roughly half a mile of terrain. The voices they each heard had stopped at the same moment. He was certain of this because he had been counting his steps on the way back up, and she was certain of it because she had checked her watch when the voice called from above her. The times matched within a minute. Whatever had been producing those sounds on both slopes had stopped at the same time, simultaneously, from two different locations. They did not discuss theories in the shelter. They ate the last of their food, drank water, and waited for the fog to lift enough to make the trail to the trailhead safe. She said neither of them talked much during the wait. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the things there were to say did not seem like the right things to say in the shelter, in the fog, still 4 miles from the car. When the visibility improved enough, they moved out. Fast pace, stayed on the trail, did not split up. At the trailhead, he checked the official register out of habit and the logbook in the wooden box, the one they had signed that morning. Standard practice, a way of confirming you are out safely. He opened it to the current page. Their entry from the morning was there. Names, time, planned route, estimated return. Below it, in the same day's column, there was one more entry. No name, no time, just East Slope. Don't answer. The ink was dry, the handwriting was not theirs. She looked at it carefully, and he looked at it, and neither of them recognized it, and it did not match any other entry on the page. The entry had been there when they arrived that morning. They had signed above it without reading far enough down. Someone had written that warning in the official trailhead register before they started the trail. Someone had known, or suspected, or had reason to believe that something on the east slope of that loop would be calling out to people that day. She photographed the entry with her phone. She photographed the partial register page from the shelter too, the torn one that ended mid-sentence. When she got home, she printed both photographs and put them side by side on the kitchen table and looked at them for a long time. The partial sentence from the shelter register ended. If you hear someone calling from the east slope, she had gone down the east slope. Not him. She had taken the left fork along the ridge and arrived at the rejoining point, and heard his voice from the east slope below her, and gone down after it. The warning in the shelter register, the one someone had started writing and then torn away, was specifically about the east slope. The voice she followed was on the east slope. The warning in the trailhead register confirmed it. He had gone down the west slope. The west slope was not mentioned in either warning. She thought about that for a while, and then she thought about the one detail that differed between their accounts. She had heard a third call from above after she turned around. He had heard nothing after he turned around. The voice on the east slope had called her back up with a third call. The voice on the west slope had simply stopped when he decided to leave. She does not do loop trails anymore. She said it plainly and without drama. She just does not do them. Any trail that requires splitting up at a junction and meeting at a far point is a trail she does not walk. He understands without needing it explained. He says the part that stays with him is the timing. Both voices stopping at the same moment from opposite slopes, as if they were operated by the same switch, as if whatever was producing them on two different hillsides in two different directions received a signal at the same instant and went quiet together. He is a land surveyor. He thinks in terms of coordinates and sightlines and physical relationships between points in space. He has tried to build a model of what would explain what they experienced, and he cannot do it. Two people, opposite slopes, simultaneous voices, simultaneous silence. The geometry does not resolve into anything he recognizes. The shelter register notebook had been in use for about 2 years, based on the dates of the earliest entries. Whoever wrote the partial warning and tore it had done so sometime in those 2 years. The trailhead register entry had no date, only a day column that matched their hiking date. Both warnings were there before they arrived. Both addressed a specific thing on a specific slope of a specific trail. Neither warning had a signature. 2 accounts from 2 people, submitted separately. neither knowing the other had sent anything in. Every detail matching except one. One detail that should not be possible. The next account comes from someone who was completely alone, and that, in some ways, made it worse. She found the listing on a regional rental platform, not one of the big ones, a smaller site that aggregated properties from local hosts across the Mid-Atlantic and Southern Appalachian region. The kind of site where the photos are slightly out of focus and the descriptions are written by the owners themselves, and the prices are low enough to make you overlook the part where the nearest town is 40 minutes away. The cabin was in southwestern Virginia, up a gravel road off a state route she had never heard of, listed at $60 a night with a 2-night minimum. The description said, main room with wood stove, sleeping loft, propane range, no Wi-Fi, no television, no cell service inside the structure. Creek access. Bring your own firewood or use what's stacked on the porch. She booked 3 nights. She was in her early 30s, a writer, not professionally yet, but working on it. The way people work on things they are serious about but have not yet been paid for. She had a project she needed uninterrupted time with, and she had been unable to get that time in her apartment. And she had decided that a cabin with no Wi-Fi and no cell service was not a deprivation, but a solution. She packed her typewriter in a padded bag, a week's worth of groceries in 2 cardboard boxes, 3 notebooks, a stack of books she had been meaning to read, and a good rain jacket because the forecast showed possible showers on Saturday. She arrived on a Friday afternoon, mid-October, the light already going golden and low by the time she turned onto the gravel road. The cabin sat in a small clearing, trees close on 3 sides, a short slope down to a creek she could hear but not yet see from the driveway. It was smaller than the photo suggested, cabins always are, but solid. Good roof. Dry porch. The key was in a lockbox beside the door, the code in the confirmation email she had printed out because she knew she would have no signal to check her phone. She unloaded the car in 2 trips, left her wet boots near the door. It had rained on the drive up, the gravel road had been soft in the low spots, and her boots had taken on mud up past the ankle on the walk from the car to the porch. She put the groceries away, noting the layout of the kitchen. Propane range, small refrigerator that hummed louder than expected, a shelf of mismatched dishes, a drawer with a can opener and some basic utensils. She found the floor plan card tacked inside one of the cabinet doors, a hand-drawn sketch on index card showing the main room, the sleeping loft above it via a wooden ladder, and a small bathroom tucked under the loft. 2 rooms essentially, plus the bathroom. She checked the wood stove. Old cast iron, the kind that needs coaxing. She had used one before in a rented place in Vermont and knew the routine. She found the damper, cleared some old ash from the grate, got a small fire going with the kindling stacked in the box beside it. The stove ticked and popped as it warmed up. She opened the window above the kitchen sink a crack and let the smell of burning wood and cold creek air come through. Then she made soup on the propane range and read the guest book while it heated. 3 years of entries. Mostly couples, mostly positive. Notes about the quiet, the creek, the quality of the dark when you turned all the lights off. A few solo travelers like her. One person who had stayed in January and written 2 pages about the snow on the creek and the way the silence felt medicinal. She read it twice. It was the kind of thing you write when a place has done something for you that you could not have predicted, and you want to record it before it fades. She went to bed early and slept well. She did not hear anything the first night. The second night was different. She had been writing most of the day, good hours, the kind that go fast because the work is working. And she had eaten dinner late, and she was tired in the specific satisfying way that comes from a day of concentrated effort. She got the stove loaded up for the night, checked the door lock, and climbed the ladder to the loft. She read for maybe 20 minutes and turned the light off. She was almost asleep when she heard the sound below the floor. Slow, rhythmic. She lay still and listened. Not mechanical. The propane was off. The refrigerator had its own distinct hum, and this was not it. The stove was just ticking down from the evening fire. This was something else. A movement. Something shifting, pausing, shifting again. The rhythm was irregular, but it repeated. A drag and a pause, drag and a pause. The way something moves when it is exploring a space rather than crossing it. Old cabins on piers have animals underneath them. This is a fact of old cabin life in rural Appalachia. Possums, raccoons, the occasional groundhog, sometimes a dog from a neighboring property looking for a dry place to sleep. The sound was consistent with an animal moving in the crawl space. She had stayed in enough old places to know that the sounds of wildlife under a structure on a cold night are ordinary and not worth losing sleep over. She put her headphones on, put on something she had downloaded before losing signal, and went to sleep. In the morning, the sound was gone, and she did not think about it again until it came back. The second morning was clear and cold. She made coffee on the propane range and stood at the kitchen window watching the creek through the trees, the water catching the early light. She was thinking about the chapter she was working on, turning a structural problem over in her mind the way you turn something in your hands, looking for the way it fits, when she noticed the curtain. It was at the back of the main room, a heavy curtain on a rod, the kind of thick, dark fabric that functions as both decoration and insulation in a cold cabin. She had seen it when she arrived. It was against the back wall, floor to ceiling, and she had registered it as a decorative element, something to cover a drafty section of wall or provide a backdrop to the room. She had not looked behind it. She had had no reason to. The floor plan card showed the back wall as solid. The listing description mentioned nothing behind it. She put her coffee down and crossed the room and pulled the curtain aside. A door. Old. 6-panel construction. The kind of door that had been built when the cabin was built. The wood darkened with age, and the frame slightly warped from decades of seasonal expansion and contraction. A door that had been there as long as the cabin had been there, hidden behind a curtain she had spent 24 hours not moving. She stood and looked at it for a moment, running through explanations. Storage closet, utility access, a pantry the listing had not mentioned. She tried the handle, locked. She pressed her palm flat against the wood. It was warm. Not the ambient warmth of a room temperature surface in a heated space. Warm the way a door is warm when the room on the other side has heat in it. Sustained heat, not residual. Something on the other side of that locked door was generating warmth, and had been, and the wood had been absorbing it long enough to be noticeably different from everything around it. She stood with her hand on the door for a long moment. Then she took her hand away and went to get her phone. No signal inside, same as the listing had said. She went out to the porch and stood in the cold and tried. 1 bar, intermittent. She called the number listed in the rental confirmation. It dropped twice. On the third try, she got a connection thin enough to talk through, and she asked about the door at the back of the main room, the one behind the curtain. There was a pause on the other end, not a long pause, but a pause. Then the host said, "That room's not part of the rental." The call dropped. She stood on the porch with the phone in her hand, and the creak audible below the slope, and the cold coming in through her socks, where she had not put her boots on before stepping outside. The host had not said there was no door, had not said she was mistaken, had said the room was not part of the rental, which meant the room existed, which meant there was a room behind that door that the listing had not mentioned, that the floor plan card had not shown, that she had been sleeping 20 feet away from for 2 nights without knowing it was there. And something on the other side of it was warm. She did not try the handle again that day. She went back inside, pulled the curtain back over the door, and sat down at her typewriter. She did not write anything for about an hour. She sat with her hands on the keys and looked at the curtain and thought about practical explanations. A utility room with a water heater, a generator space, some kind of heating equipment the host maintained separately from the rental portion. These were all possible. Old cabins were often retrofitted with infrastructure that did not make it into the listing description because the owner did not think of it as a guest amenity, just as a mechanical necessity. The warmth had a reasonable explanation. The locked door had a reasonable explanation. The host's pause before answering had a reasonable explanation. She made lunch. She wrote through the afternoon. She did not touch the curtain. That night, the sound came back. It started the way it had started the night before, slow, rhythmic, the drag and pause of something moving in the crawl space beneath the floor. She was in the loft, not yet asleep, the stove ticking down below. She lay still and listened. The sound moved. This was the difference from the night before. The night before it had seemed stationary or close to it, the random movement of an animal exploring a space. Tonight it had direction. She could track it through the floor, the sound starting at the far end of the cabin, below the kitchen, below the bathroom, and moving steadily and slowly toward the back wall, toward the locked door. She sat up in the loft and listened and did not move. The drag and pause continued, unhurried, patient, moving through the crawl space below her in a straight line toward the back of the cabin. She could hear it pass below the ladder, below the area of floor between the loft and the back wall. It reached the far end and stopped. She checked the time. Just past 2 a.m. From behind the locked door, not from below the floor, not from outside the cabin, from directly behind the wood of the locked door she had pressed her palm against that morning, came 3 knocks. Slow, evenly spaced. The kind of knock that is not asking to come in. The kind that is letting you know it is there. She sat in the loft and did not breathe for a moment. Then she breathed. Then, before she had fully decided to do it, she knocked back. 2 knocks. Her knuckles on the loft floor above the door below, quiet but deliberate, the way you respond to a sound before your brain has caught up with the decision. The pause lasted long enough that she had almost convinced herself nothing would follow. Then, from behind the door, 2 knocks back. The same rhythm she had used, the same spacing. Not 3, not 1, not a random response. 2, matching hers exactly. As if whatever was behind that door had been waiting to hear how many she would give before deciding how many to return. She did not knock again. She did not go down the ladder. She sat in the loft with her back against the wall and her knees pulled up and her keys in her hand. Car keys, the instinct to hold them surprising her, the metal edge pressing into her palm. And she watched the curtain below. It did not move. The door did not rattle. The handle did not turn. Nothing changed in the visible portion of the cabin below her. The curtain hung straight and still, and the fire was out, and the only light was the faint glow from the crack under the bathroom door, where she had left a small lamp burning. Around 4 a.m, the sound under the floor started again, moving away this time. Back toward the far end of the cabin, the same direction it had come from, the drag and pause retreating through the crawl space below her, the way a tide pulls back. She tracked it to the far end, and then it stopped, and the cabin was quiet, and she sat against the wall in the loft until the window above the kitchen began to go gray. First light. She came down the ladder. She did not make coffee. She did not change out of the clothes she had slept in. She put on her boots and her jacket. carried her typewriter and one box of groceries to the car, and drove down the gravel road to the state route without looking back at the cabin. She left the second box of groceries on the kitchen counter. She left the other notebook on the table. She left the window above the sink still open a crack. She did not go back for any of it. She contacted the rental platform from her car when she got enough signal, parked in the gravel turnout at the bottom of the road. She filed a complaint and asked to speak with someone about the property. The representative she reached told her the property listing included the main room and sleeping loft only. She asked specifically about the back room, the one behind the curtain. The representative checked the property survey on file and said there was no additional room listed on the survey. The property footprint, according to their records, included only the main room, loft, and bathroom. She had the call recorded on her phone. She still has it. She went back to the listing when she got home. Pulled it up on her laptop where the photos were larger than on her phone. She had looked at the photos before booking, the way you look at listing photos, quickly, scanning for deal breakers, not studying details. She studied them now. There were 6 photos. The fourth one showed the main room from the entrance, looking toward the back wall. The curtain was visible in the background, slightly open on the left side, the way a curtain sits when it has been moved and not quite fully closed again. Through the gap, the door frame was visible. Just the frame, the door itself was in shadow. But at the base of the door, where the door met the floor, there was a thin line of light. The photo had been taken years before her stay. It was in the listing when she booked. The light under the door was visible in a photograph taken years ago. Whatever was on the other side of that locked door had been warm and lit for years. Long before she arrived. Long before she pressed her palm against the wood and felt the warmth. She does not rent remote properties anymore. She does not stay in cabins. She said in her submission that she is not afraid of the dark. She wants to be clear about that. She has never been afraid of the dark. What she is afraid of now is curtains she has not looked behind. The specific fear of a barrier she has not tested. A surface she has not pressed her hand against. A room that might be there on the other side of something she assumed was a wall. There was one more detail she found after she submitted the account when she was going through the photographs she had taken during the stay. Pictures of the creek, the view from the porch, some notes she had photographed from her notebook. She had photographed the guest book on the first night methodically, page by page, thinking she might use some of the entries as material for her writing. She had not read every entry at the time. She read them now, on her laptop screen, going through the photographs one by one. The third to last entry before her stay, dated about 8 months earlier, was written in neat, even handwriting. It said, "Lovely cabin. Slept well both nights. Fireplace is wonderful. Creek is beautiful in the morning." And then, below the main entry, a postscript. P.S. Do not knock back. She looked at that line for a long time. 8 months before her stay, someone had been in that cabin, heard the knocks from behind that door, and had made the same decision she had made, to respond, and had come away with a warning specific enough to write down, clear enough to leave for whoever came next. She had knocked back. She had not known not to. The warning was in the guest book, and she had photographed the guest book and she had not read far enough. She does not know what would have happened if she had gone down the ladder and opened the door. She does not want to know. She said that plainly in the submission. She does not want to know. And she thinks that instinct, the one that kept her in the loft with her keys in her hand, is the only reason she is in a position to not want to know. The listing is still up. She checked. The curtain is still visible in the fourth photo, slightly open on the left side. The line of light under the door is still there if you look for it. The back room is still not mentioned in the description. The full platform listing is still active. The calendar still shows available dates. She never found out what was in that room. She is not sure she wants to. The next account does not come from a rental or a stranger's property. It comes from a man who inherited the land and discovered the previous owners had left something behind they did not put in the deed. He had met his great-uncle Raymond exactly 3 times. Once at a family reunion when he was 11, once at a funeral for a different relative when he was in his mid-20s, and once more, briefly, uncomfortably, at a Christmas gathering his mother had organized the year before Raymond died. Raymond was his grandfather's younger brother, a man who had spent his entire life on 15 acres of eastern Tennessee hill country and had, as far as anyone in the family could tell, been completely content with that arrangement. He did not travel. He did not attend things unless he had to. He had no children and had never, to anyone's knowledge, been seriously interested in having any. He was polite at the gatherings he could not avoid, and he left early. When the letter came from the county attorney's office informing him that Raymond had left him the property, his first response was confusion. There were other family members who had been closer to Raymond, geographically and personally. There were cousins who had visited the land. He had not been there once in his life. The attorney's letter did not offer an explanation for the bequest, and when he called to ask if there was an accompanying note or any indication of why Raymond had chosen him specifically, the attorney said only that there was a letter attached to the deed, sealed to be opened by the recipient. He opened it when the paperwork arrived. It was short, 3 sentences. The first said that the property was sound, and the cabin was in good repair. The second said the key was under the mat at the front door, and that was where it had always been. The third sentence said, "Leave the back gate locked." No explanation, no context. Just the 3 sentences and Raymond's signature at the bottom, shaky but deliberate, the handwriting of a man who had known exactly what he was writing. He drove down from Ohio in late August, 7 hours, give or take, ending on a 2-lane state route that fed into a county road that fed into a gravel track that the GPS stopped recognizing about a mile before the property boundary. He found the place by the mailbox, which had the parcel number on it in reflective stickers, and turned down the drive. The cabin sat on a rise above the creek, surrounded on 3 sides by mature hardwoods that were just beginning to think about turning. It was solid, the way Raymond's letter had promised. Good metal roof, dry porch, no visible rot on the siding. Better than he had expected for a structure that had been lived in by one old man with no apparent interest in renovation. He swept the porch before he unlocked the door, found the key under the mat where the letter said it would be, went through the cabin methodically, not looking for anything specific, just taking inventory, the way you walk through a property you are considering selling and try to see it the way a buyer would. 2 main rooms, a kitchen that had been updated sometime in the 90s, a bathroom that had not been updated since before that, a back porch that needed 2 boards replaced. He checked the wood stove for birds' nests, which is the first thing you check in a stove that has not been used in a while, and found none. He found the back gate on his walk around the property perimeter, a chain-link gate set into a post and wire fence that ran along the back of the property, separating the maintained portion, the cabin, the yard, the path down to the creek, from the steeper wooded slope behind it. The gate was secured with a rusted chain and a padlock that had been there long enough to develop a thin skin of rust on the body, though the shackle still looked solid. He had no key for the padlock. He had not expected one. Raymond's letter had said to leave it locked, not to open it and then lock it again. He shook the chain once, felt the lock hold, and left it. He was unpacking the car when the truck stopped at the road. A woman in her 60s, driving something mud-crusted and well-used, the kind of truck that has earned its condition. She did not pull into the drive. She stopped at the road and sat with the engine running and watched him carry a box from the car to the porch. He walked over. She looked at the cabin when he approached. Not at him. At the cabin, the way you look at something you have been keeping an eye on for a while, and are checking on now that circumstances have changed. "You're Raymond's boy?" she said. He explained the relation. She nodded slowly, still looking at the property. "You want to leave that gate alone," she said. He said he had no key for the padlock anyway. She nodded again, like that was the right answer for the wrong reason. "Raymond left it locked for good reason," she said. Then she put the truck in gear and drove off before he could ask what the reason was. He watched the truck until it disappeared around the curve of the county road. Then he went back to unloading the car and thought about what she had said, and decided it was the kind of thing people say about old rural properties all the time. There was a mine shaft back there, or a sinkhole, or a section of slope that was unstable. Old land had old hazards. A locked gate was a sensible precaution. Raymond had probably locked it for the same reason any careful landowner locks a back gate, to keep people from wandering into something dangerous by accident. He made a note to call the county in the morning and ask about historical hazard records on the parcel. The next morning, he walked the creek line. The part of the creek that was accessible from the maintained side of the property ran clean and clear over flat stones, the water cold enough in late August to suggest a good spring source somewhere up the slope. He walked it from the drive down to where the fence line cut across, and the creek continued through the gate onto the other side. He stood at the fence and looked through the chain link. The creek continued into the wooded slope. The same clean water, the same flat stones. The trees were thicker on the other side, the canopy closer. The light coming through in the particular broken way it comes through old hardwood canopy in late summer. Maybe 30 yards past the gate, in a small natural clearing where the creek made a slight bend, there was a chair. One chair. Wooden. Straight-backed. The kind of chair that belongs at a kitchen table, sitting in the open air on the creek bank, facing the water. No structure near it, no other furniture. Nothing to suggest why it was there, except that someone had put it there deliberately. It was positioned too precisely to have been left by accident or flood, sitting level on the bank with its back to the woods and its face to the water, like someone had chosen that spot to sit and watch the creek, and had left the chair for next time. He stood at the gate and looked at it for a long time. He almost reached for the chain. His hand actually moved toward it before he stopped himself, and later he said he could not fully explain what stopped him except that he thought about the woman's face when she had said Raymond's name. Not grief, not affection. Something more specific than either of those. The look of someone who knows how a particular story ended and is watching the opening of a new one. He went back to the cabin and made dinner, and did not think about the chair. Or he tried not to think about it, which is a different thing. He found the journals in the cabinet above the refrigerator, pushed to the back behind a stack of old almanacs and a coffee can full of miscellaneous hardware. 3 composition notebooks, the black and white marbled kind, each one filled in Raymond's handwriting, the same shaky deliberateness he had seen on the letter attached to the deed. He brought them to the kitchen table and opened the first one. Farm records, dates, weather observations, notes on the garden and the woodpile, and the condition of the roof after heavy rain. The kind of daily accounting a man keeps when he lives alone on a piece of land, and the land is the primary fact of his life. Planting dates, first frost dates, creek levels after storms. Practical and unremarkable, the record of a man paying close attention to ordinary things. The second notebook was more of the same. A few years later in date, the handwriting slightly less steady, the entries sometimes shorter, but the same essential content. He noted that Raymond had recorded the creek level obsessively. More than the weather, more than anything else, he measured and recorded the creek level at the back of the property. Sometimes twice a day. The notations were just numbers, a measurement in inches against some reference point that was not explained in the notebook. He assumed a stake in the bank, a standard informal gauge. He turned pages. He opened the third notebook expecting the same. The third notebook had one sentence in it. Written across the first page, in handwriting that was not the careful measured script of the farm records, but something more urgent, the letters larger and less controlled. Do not open the gate after it sits down. He turned the page, the same sentence. Different pen, possibly different day. The ink was slightly different in color. Do not open the gate after it sits down. He turned pages. Every page. 40 pages of the same sentence, written over and over in handwriting that started urgent and became, as the pages progressed, something harder to characterize. Not frantic, not the deteriorating scrawl of someone losing their mind in an obvious way. Something more deliberate than that, and more frightening because of it. The letters got larger as the notebook progressed. The pressure on the page got heavier. He could feel the impressions through the back of the pages. By the final third of the notebook, the sentence was taking up the full page, one word per line. The pen pressed hard enough in places to score the paper. Do not open the gate after it sits down. He sat at the kitchen table with the third notebook open in front of him for a long time. Then he got his phone and photographed all 3 notebooks. Every page, starting with the first entry in the farm records and ending with the last heavy-pressed page of the third one. He was not sure why he needed the photographs. He took them anyway. He did not sleep in the cabin that second night. He moved his bag to the car, locked the cabin, and sat in the driver's seat with the doors locked and the seat reclined enough to be tolerable and the engine off to save the battery. He could see the back fence line from the car, or the portion of it that the cabin's exterior light reached, which was not the gate itself but the corner post nearest the cabin. He watched it until he was too tired to watch it, and then he slept badly and woke repeatedly and checked the corner post each time, and it was always just a post. Around midnight, he woke to the sound of the chain, not wind. The night was still. He could see the tree line through the windshield and nothing was moving. The chain was moving. He could hear it clearly from the car, a deliberate metallic sound, the specific sound of a chain being handled rather than disturbed by weather. A testing sound. The kind of sound a chain makes when someone is working their way along it, feeling for the weak point or the release, checking the padlock in the systematic way of someone who has done this before and is checking again. He sat in the driver's seat and did not move. The chain moved for approximately 3 minutes. He was watching the clock on the dash because he needed something to look at that was not the darkness past the fence line. 3 minutes, and then it stopped. Clean stop, no trailing rattle, no gradual stillness. Just stopped, the way a deliberate sound stops when the person making it has finished. He was still watching the clock when the chair scraped. From the other side of the locked gate, in the dark, past the fence line, the wooden chair he had seen on the creek bank that afternoon scraped against the ground. Not tipping over, not falling. The specific sound of chair legs dragging across earth. The sound a chair makes when someone pulls it out from a table or settles their weight into it and it shifts back slightly. A short scrape, then stillness. Something had sat down. He did not get out of the car. He put his hand on the ignition key and held it there and did not turn it, because starting the engine would make light and noise, and he did not want to make either. He sat in the dark car and listened, and the property was completely quiet for the rest of the night. The kind of quiet that has something in it, that is not empty but full. The way a room is full when someone is standing in it, not making any noise. First, light came slowly. When the sky was fully gray, he got out of the car and walked to the fence line. The gate was still locked. The chain was still in place, the padlock still solid on the shackle. He looked through the chain link. The chair was gone, not moved further back into the woods, not overturned by the creek bank, not visible anywhere in the clearing or beyond it into the trees. Gone, the way something is gone when it has been removed rather than displaced. The ground where it had stood for however many years, and it had been there long enough to leave marks, 4 clear leg impressions pressed into the soil, was empty. Around the leg impressions, in a rough circle maybe 6 feet across, the grass was pressed flat. Not randomly flat, the way grass goes flat after rain. Pressed in a consistent direction, following the circle, the way grass goes when something has walked the same path around a point repeatedly. A long time of walking in a circle around a chair. He stood at the fence and looked at the pressed circle for a while. Then he went inside and made coffee and called the county assessor's office when they opened. He asked about historical hazard records on the parcel. The clerk checked and came back with a reference to an old drift mine on the property. A small operation, privately owned, sealed in 1947 by order of the county after the primary operator died with no heirs to take over the permits. The mine entrance was recorded as being located behind the rear access gate of the parcel. That was why the gate existed. That was the official reason it was locked. He sat with that for a while. A sealed mine explained the gate. It did not explain Raymond's letter. It did not explain 40 pages of the same sentence in worsening handwriting. A sealed drift mine does not make a sound like a chain being tested in the still of midnight. A sealed drift mine does not sit in a chair on a creek bank and leave a pressed circle in the grass from walking around it. And the third notebook predated the mine closure by 3 years. Whatever Raymond had been writing about, he had been writing about it before the mine was sealed, before the gate had an official reason to exist. He sold the property 4 months later. He did not disclose the journals in the sale, he was not legally required to, and he had made a decision, which he acknowledged was not entirely rational, that the information in those notebooks was not something that should be passed along with the land. He destroyed the third one. He said he could not fully explain why. It just seemed like something that should not travel. He kept the farm records, the first 2 notebooks, with their careful weather observations and creek measurements and planting dates. He kept those because they were Raymond's, and Raymond had left him the land, and that seemed like a reason to keep something of the man. He still has them. He has not opened them since he got home. He kept a copy of the deed as well. He looked at it recently, he said, for the first time in a while. On the original property survey, the hand-drawn plat from when the parcel was first officially measured, the section of land behind the rear access gate is marked differently from the rest of the property. Every other section has measurements, boundary notations, the standard language of a property survey. The section behind the gate has none of that. In the space where the measurements should be, in the handwriting of whatever county surveyor drew the original plat, it says only, "Not measured. Access not advised." The survey is dated 1962, 15 years after the mine was sealed, 15 years after the official reason for not going back there had already been established, and the surveyors still would not go in, did not measure it, did not note what they found, just wrote 4 words and left the section blank, and presumably went home and did not come back. Nobody asked why at the time. The record passed from hand to hand with that notation intact, and nobody ever followed up on it. Or if they did not put what they found in any document he could locate. The section behind the gate has been officially unmeasured and officially inadvisable since 1962, and possibly before that, and possibly since before Raymond was born. Raymond knew something was back there. He locked the gate. He wrote it down 40 times in increasing urgency, and he left the property to a relative he barely knew and said 3 things in his final letter. The cabin is sound. The key is under the mat. Leave the gate locked. The gate is locked now. Whoever bought the property has not reached out with questions. He does not know if they found the chair impressions, the pressed circle in the grass, the gate chain that sounds like it is tested from the wrong side on still nights. He does not know if they read the surveyor's notation on the deed. He hopes they leave the gate alone. He does not have a theory about what was back there. He said that plainly, and he seemed to mean it. He is a practical man from Ohio who inherited land he did not know and sold it after 2 nights because the alternative was staying, and staying was not something he was willing to do. That is the whole of his position on the matter. 6 accounts, 6 places, 6 moments where something behaved in a way that should not have been possible. The last account is different. It is the one that people in one small county in western North Carolina still do not like to discuss. Not because nothing happened, but because what happened has a partial explanation, and the partial explanation is somehow worse than none at all. The radiator hose failed on a Saturday afternoon in mid-October 2009 on a 2-lane state route in the mountains of western North Carolina. Marcus was driving. Delia was navigating from a printed sheet of turn-by-turn directions she had made at home before they left, because the route they were taking went through enough dead zones that relying on the phone felt optimistic. They were on a road trip with no fixed destination, the kind of trip where the point is the driving and the stops accumulate as you go. 2 people with a long weekend and no particular plan except to be somewhere other than where they usually were. The temperature gauge climbed into the red over the course of maybe 3 minutes. Marcus pulled off where the shoulder was wide enough to do it safely, which was not very wide. He got out and opened the hood, and the steam told him what he needed to know without his having to investigate further. A hose or a connection. Something that needed a mechanic and a parts store, and neither of those things was visible from where they were standing. No cell signal. This was not a surprise. They had been in and out of signal for the last hour. Delia checked anyway, walking a few feet in each direction on the gravel shoulder to see if the bars changed. They did not. They could see a structure about a quarter-mile back, set off the road behind a short gravel drive. 1-story, white paint, a sign they could not read from the distance, but that had the shape of a business sign rather than a residential mailbox. They locked the car and walked to it. It was a motel. 8 rooms in a single-story block. The paint faded to the color white goes when it has been through enough winters. A covered walkway running the length of the building. Numbered doors with numbered parking spaces. A small office at the far end with a light on inside. The kind of motel that has been in the same family for decades, that does not appear on booking platforms, that you find by being somewhere you did not plan to be. The woman behind the desk was in her 70s. Sharp eyes, unhurried manner, the quality of stillness that some people develop when they have been in one place long enough that they have stopped needing to perform anything for anyone. She looked at them when they came in, registered the situation without being told. No luggage, slightly disheveled, the particular expression of people whose day has gone sideways, and asked what they needed. Marcus explained about the car. She said the mechanic in town was Jerry, and Jerry did not work weekends, but she could call him at home Sunday morning, and he would likely be there by 10. She said this without any particular apology, the way someone states a fact about how things work in a place where things work on their own schedule. She had a room available. 2 nights, cash or card. She preferred cash. She wrote their names in a paper ledger, gave them a key on a plastic tag with the number 4 on it. Then, as Marcus was picking up the key from the counter, she said it. The fire road behind the property. Don't drive it. And don't go near the yellow house at the top. Not a question, not a suggestion. A statement, delivered in the same flat, practical tone she had used to explain about Jerry the mechanic. As if it were part of the standard information for room 4, the same category as where to find extra towels or what time the office closed. Marcus said, "Okay." Delia said, "Thank you." They took the key and found the room. Room 4 was at the far end of the building from the office, which meant its window faced the back of the property rather than the road. The room was clean in the way that old motels are clean, not hotel clean, but genuinely clean. The surfaces worn smooth with use and care. Cheap blankets on the bed, good and heavy. A bathroom with a tub that had been reglazed at some point. A small table and 2 chairs by the window. On the table, someone had left a local road map, the county type, folded to show the area immediately around the town. Through the window, they could see the back of the property. A strip of mowed grass, then a gravel track running uphill from a rusted gate set into a simple wire fence. The gate was closed. Beyond it, the track curved uphill through trees and disappeared. Above the tree line, partway up the slope, there was nothing visible from ground level. Just the dark shape of the mountain and the sky above it, going orange and then purple as the evening came in. They ate at the diner in town, a 10-minute walk down the state route. 1 waitress, 4 tables occupied, a menu on a chalkboard above the counter. The food was good in the uncomplicated way that diner food is good when the person making it has been making it for a long time. They walked back to the motel after dark and watched television on a set that got 4 channels, and then turned the lights off around 10. Saturday night, Delia woke up. She did not know what woke her. She lay still for a moment, the way you do when you surface from sleep in an unfamiliar room and need a second to remember where you are. Then she looked at the window. Through the glass, through the dark, and the light rain that had started while they were sleeping, partway up the slope above the fire road, a light. Yellow. Steady and unwavering in a way that rain usually disrupts. Too high up the slope to be a lantern someone was carrying. Too steady to be a fire. The light of a window, or something like a window holding its color against the wet dark. She watched it for a while. Then she woke Marcus. They both looked at it. A yellow light, steady through the rain, above the fire road, in the trees on the slope. A house, they decided. Someone lived up there, on the fire road, in the structure the motel owner had called the Yellow House. A house with a light on a rainy Saturday night. Ordinary. They went back to sleep. In the morning, over the bad coffee from the machine in the motel hallway, Marcus mentioned the light to Mrs. Presley when she came out of the office to check that the heating unit in their room was working. He said they had seen the light at the Yellow House last night through the rain. Mrs. Presley looked at him. Then she looked at the window of the office, at the slope visible above the tree line, the way she might look at something she checks on regularly without making a show of it. "That's the Yellow House," she said. Then she went back inside. Marcus stood in the hallway with his coffee and looked at the slope. In the daylight, with the rain stopped and the morning clear and cold, the slope above the fire road showed only trees. No structure visible, no roof line, no clearing. Just trees going up the mountain the way trees do, uninterrupted. That afternoon, restless with nothing to do while they waited for Sunday and Jerry the mechanic, they walked the perimeter of the motel property. The back fence line, the rusted gate, the gravel fire road on the other side of it. The gate was closed, but not locked. No padlock, just a rusted latch that sat in its bracket without being secured. Beyond the gate, the gravel track was clear of debris. recently maintained looking in the way of a road that is used regularly rather than one that has been left alone. There were tire tracks in the gravel, fresh ones, the kind that hold their edges before rain fills them in, which meant these had been made after the rain started. Something had gone up that road in the rain in the last several hours, and the tracks were narrow. Not a truck, something smaller. Marcus crouched down and looked at the tread pattern. Not a car tire either, not exactly. The tread was different. Narrower lugs, a pattern he did not recognize from any vehicle he knew well. He photographed the tracks with his phone. He would show that photograph to a deputy the following day. The deputy would look at it for a long time, and then set the phone down on the diner counter and look at something on the wall for a moment, before picking it up again and handing it back. He would not say what he thought the tread pattern was. He would not say he had seen it before, but he would not say he had not seen it before either, and Marcos noticed that distinction. Something had gone up the fire road after the rain started. Whatever it was had gone up in the dark, without being heard, and had left tracks with a tread pattern that a man who knew his vehicles could not place. The yellow house was at the top of that road. Mrs. Presley had said not to go near it. She had said it the way she said everything, plainly, without drama, as a statement of how things were. On Sunday morning, Marcus went up the road anyway. He told Delia he was just going to stretch his legs. This was not entirely untrue. He had slept badly, and the room felt small in the morning, and he needed air and movement. But he also wanted to see the yellow house. Not because he was looking for something strange, because a steady yellow light visible through a quarter-mile of rain at night is the kind of thing a person wants a daylight explanation for, and he was the kind of person who preferred explanations to questions. He went through the unlatched gate and started up the gravel track. The fire road was in better condition than it looked from the fence line. The gravel was packed solid, the drainage ditches on either side recently cleared, the sort of maintenance that happens regularly rather than occasionally. Someone was keeping this road up. He walked the first curve, which bent left and uphill, and then the second, which bent right and continued climbing. The trees on either side were close, second-growth hardwood mostly, the canopy not yet full enough at this elevation to block the morning sky completely. The light was good. The air was cold and smelled like wet leaves and creek water from somewhere below. At the second curve, he stopped. There was a track leading off the fire road to the right, not a maintained track, more of a worn path. The kind that gets established by repeated use rather than deliberate construction. It cut through the underbrush toward a clearing visible through the trees, maybe 100 yards off the road. He followed it. The clearing was roughly circular, maybe 40 feet across, the grass grown tall and gone to seed in the way of a clearing that is not mowed, but is somehow kept clear of the tree saplings that would otherwise colonize it within a few seasons. In the center of the clearing was a foundation. Concrete block construction. The blocks were old, not just weathered, but genuinely old. The kind of old that takes decades, the surface gone rough and porous with freeze-thaw cycles, and the specific gray-green color of concrete that has had moss growing on it long enough to stain the substrate. The walls rose to maybe 3 feet at the highest point, and less than 2 in some places where blocks had shifted or been displaced. No walls above that. No roof. No floor other than the ground inside the foundation perimeter, which was packed earth and dead leaves and a winter's worth of accumulated debris. Inside the foundation, against the far wall, was a rusted iron chair. Not a wooden chair. An iron one, the kind of heavy, ornate outdoor furniture that was made before outdoor furniture became lightweight and portable, the kind that weighs 40 pounds and stays where you put it. The iron was rusted through in places. the joints showing the red-brown of long exposure, the kind of rust that means years of unprotected weather. The chair had been there long enough that the rust had begun to stain the concrete block behind it in a thin vertical streak where water ran off the arm during rain. The chair had been there for years. The foundation had been there for decades. There was no roof, no walls above knee height, no enclosed space of any kind. The foundation was open to the sky on all sides above the 3-foot block walls, which meant it had always been open to the sky, which meant there was no room, there was no structure. There was a foundation and a chair, and above them nothing but the morning air and the sound of wind in the upper canopy. He stood inside the foundation and turned slowly and looked at the block walls and the packed earth and the rusted chair and the sky above it all, and he thought about the yellow light. The steady yellow light they had seen from the motel room window the night before, holding its color through a quarter-mile of rain. The light of a window, they had decided. The light of a house. There was no house. There was no window. There was nothing here that could produce a sustained yellow light visible through rain at night. There was a roofless foundation and an iron chair and the sound of his own breathing and nothing else. He photographed the foundation from 4 angles. He photographed the chair. He photographed the block walls and the packed earth floor and the open sky above and the narrow track leading back to the fire road. Then he walked back down to the motel. Delia was not in the room. He found her coming up the road from the diner with a coffee cup in each hand, and the expression she was wearing when she saw him was the expression of someone who has just been told something that settled a question they had not realized they were holding. She had gone to the diner for coffee while he was walking. She had been the only customer that early. The waitress, a woman roughly their age, local by every indication. The comfortable efficiency of someone who has worked the same counter for a long time, had brought her coffee without being asked and had said, in the tone of someone making ordinary conversation, "Your husband went up the road?" Delia said yes. The waitress said, "He come back all right?" "Not, will he, come back?" Past tense, as if the outcome were already known, and she was confirming it rather than asking about it. Delia said yes, she could see him coming down now. The waitress looked out the window, confirmed it with a glance and said, "Good, some don't." Then she went back behind the counter and refilled the coffee machine and did not elaborate, and Delia did not ask her to, because the way she said it was not the way a person says something they want to be asked about. It was the way a person states a local fact that they expect will speak for itself. Marcus showed Mrs. Presley the photographs when they got back to the motel. He pulled them up on his phone and held it out, and she took it from him and looked through them slowly. The foundation, the block walls, the packed earth floor, the iron chair. She looked at each one for the same amount of time, without hurrying, without any visible reaction. Then she handed the phone back. "That foundation's been there since my mother's time," she said. "Nobody built anything on it. Tried to once, I think. Didn't take." She looked at the slope above the tree line, the habitual check. Some things just show a light when they want to be found. Marcus asked what that meant. She considered the question as if it were reasonable. "The road is not the problem," she said. "The problem is what comes down it after someone goes up." He asked what came down it. She looked at him for a moment with the particular patience of someone who has explained a thing before and knows that explaining it again will not help. "You went up," she said. "Now you know something's aware of that." She went back inside the office. He stood on the covered walkway with the phone in his hand, and the photographs on the screen, and the slope above the tree line visible over the roof line of the motel, and the gate at the back of the property standing closed but not locked, and the fire road curving uphill on the other side of it. And he thought about what she had said. The problem is what comes down it after someone goes up. He had gone up that morning. He had walked through the unlatched gate and up the road and into the clearing, and stood inside the roofless foundation and taken photographs and come back down. And now, according to Mrs. Presley, something on that hill was aware of that fact. He went inside and locked the room door and sat on the edge of the bed and told Delia everything, the foundation and the chair, and what the waitress had said and what Mrs. Presley had said. And Delia listened to all of it without interrupting. And when he was done, she looked at the window for a moment, and then she reached over and made sure the security latch was engaged above the main lock. They ate in the room that evening. Crackers and peanut butter from Delia's bag, food she had packed for the road. Neither of them wanted to walk to the diner. Neither of them said that was the reason, but neither of them suggested going either. They watched the window. The slope above the tree line was dark. No yellow light, no light of any kind from the fire road or above it. The absence of the light felt worse than its presence had. Marcus watched the gate from the window until 11. It stayed closed. The gravel track beyond it was dark and quiet. He turned the window latch and checked it twice, and then got into bed and lay awake for a while, listening to the particular silence of a mountain motel on a cold Sunday night. The kind of silence that has texture, wind in the trees, the occasional vehicle on the state route, the ambient sound of a small place going to sleep. He was almost asleep when Delia touched his arm. She was looking at the window. Above the tree line, on the slope, the yellow light was back. Steady, unwavering, the same color and the same position as the night before, as if it had never left, as if the morning and the empty foundation and the roofless walls had been an error in his reasoning, rather than a fact he had stood inside and photographed. The light held its color against the dark mountain, and he lay in the bed and looked at it, and felt the specific discomfort of a person who has seen evidence of one thing and is now looking at evidence of another thing, and cannot make them fit into the same world. They watched it for a while without speaking. Then Marcus turned away from the window and looked at the ceiling, and after a time the tiredness was stronger than the unease, and he slept. He woke at 1 a.m. to the sound of tires on gravel. He lay still for a moment, placing the sound. Not the state route. The state route was far enough away that traffic on it was a white noise presence rather than a distinct sound, and what he was hearing was distinct, close. The specific crunch of tires moving slowly over packed gravel, the sound of a vehicle descending rather than climbing. Coming down the fire road. Delia was already awake beside him. He could tell by the quality of her stillness, the particular alertness of a person who is not moving because they are listening, not because they are asleep. He sat up and looked at the window. The gate was visible from the window, just inside the reach of the motel's single exterior light. A bare bulb on a bracket above the office end of the building that threw a yellow-white cone across the back of the property and caught the upper portion of the gate in its outer edge. The gate was closed. The latch was in place. He could see the wire fence on either side of it and the gravel of the fire road on the other side and the dark of the tree line above. The sound continued. Slow. Deliberate. The measured descent of a vehicle taking the curves carefully, the gravel shifting under the weight in the particular way gravel shifts under rubber. Getting closer. He tracked it by sound through the second curve and then the first, and then the final straight section before the gate. The sound coming down until it was close enough that he should have been able to see the headlights through the gate. There were no headlights. The exterior light reached the gate clearly enough that he could see the wire of the fence and the latch and the gravel on the other side for several feet before the dark took over. No light was coming through. Whatever was on the other side of that gate was running without headlights, in complete darkness, on a mountain fire road with 2 curves and a significant grade. Coming down without lights, without speed, without any sound except the tires on the gravel. It stopped just below the gate. He could hear the engine, idling. The low, even sound of an engine at rest, not revving, not straining, just running. He looked at the gate. Nothing visible through it. The engine idling on the other side of a closed gate with no lights and no visible vehicle in the range of the exterior light. He checked the clock on his phone. 1:04 a.m. He watched the gate. Delia sat up beside him and they both watched the gate. Neither of them spoke. The engine idled on the other side of the fence with the patience of something that had no particular reason to hurry. He counted the seconds in his head and lost count and started again. The gravel beyond the gate was dark. The wire fence was still. The latch was still in its bracket. At 1:15 by his phone, the engine stopped. Not a gradual wind down. Off. The sound cut and the night was quiet again. The quality of quiet that follows an engine stopping. A silence that has the shape of the sound that just left it. He sat in that silence and watched the gate and did not move. 5 minutes. The gate did not open. Nothing came through the fence. The exterior light held its cone across the back of the property, and the gravel on the other side of the gate was dark and still and empty as far as the light reached. Then someone knocked on the door of room 4. 3 knocks. Slow. Evenly spaced. Not the front door of the motel, not the office, the door of their specific room, number 4, at the far end of the building. 3 knocks with the particular cadence of someone who is not in a hurry and is not worried about being heard by anyone other than the people on the other side of the door. Delia was off the bed and at the back wall before the 3rd knock finished. Not running, moving fast and quietly, the way people move when they understand that making noise is not in their interest. Marcus did not move from the bed. He sat with his phone in his hand and his eyes on the door and did not breathe for a moment. The door was a standard motel door. Wood panel, hollow core, a single-keyed lock and a security chain above it. He had locked the keyed lock when they came in. He had engaged the security chain. He had checked both before getting into bed. The chain was on. He could see it from where he sat, the small metal bar sitting in its track, and he focused on it the way you focus on a specific detail when everything else is too large to look at directly. Nothing moved. The chain stayed in its track. The door did not rattle. The handle did not turn. 3 knocks, and then nothing. No voice, no further attempt. Whatever had knocked 3 times and was now waiting, or had left, or was doing something he could not hear from inside the room. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Delia stayed at the back wall. He checked the clock. 1:23 a.m. He watched the door. He watched the chain. The chain stayed where it was. At some point, the vigilance became too heavy to sustain, and he settled back against the headboard, and Delia came back to the bed and they sat together in the dark room, and did not sleep again until nearly 5, when the sky outside the window started going from black to deep blue, and the birds started, and the morning felt like a different country from the night. At first light, he went outside. The gravel in front of the motel ran the length of the building, 1 parking space per room. The other rooms were empty. They were the only guests. The gravel in front of rooms 1 through 3 was undisturbed. The stones settled and weathered, and showing the random texture of gravel that has not been recently walked on. The gravel in front of room 4 was different. A section of it, roughly the size and shape of a person standing at a door, was disturbed. The stones pushed slightly, the way gravel is pushed when something stands on it with weight. The disturbed section was directly in front of their door and nowhere else. Not in front of the neighboring rooms, not in the walkway to the left or right. Just there, in front of number 4, where something had stood. He photographed it. He looked at the gate at the back of the property. Still closed, the latch still engaged. He walked to it and looked through. The fire road on the other side was empty. The gravel showed tire tracks, the same narrow, unfamiliar tread he had photographed the day before, continuing down to just below the gate and stopping. Not turning around, stopping. The tracks came down the road and stopped at the gate, and there were no tracks returning up the road. Whatever had come down had not gone back up. Not on the road. Mrs. Presley was already in the kitchen when he knocked on the office door. He could smell coffee and something on the stove. She opened the door and looked at him with the expression of someone who expected him to be there. She had made breakfast. Eggs and toast, enough for 3 people, set out on the small table in the office kitchen before they had asked for anything. She called through to Delia, and Delia came and they sat at the table, and Mrs. Presley stood at the counter with her own coffee and watched the window the way she always seemed to be watching the window. When they were nearly done, she said, "I should have said it different." Marcus looked up. "It's not the fire road you don't drive," she said. "It's that if something comes down it, you do not answer the door." She was looking at the window, not at them. "We didn't open it," Delia said. Mrs. Presley nodded, not with relief exactly, more like confirmation. "I know," she said. "I heard it knock." She had been in her room, at the other end of the building, with a wall and 6 empty rooms between her and their door, and she had heard it knock, and she had not come out. She had stayed in her room with her door closed, and she had heard it knock on their door 3 times, and she had not come out. And the way she said it, plain, without apology, without explanation, told them everything they needed to know about how many times she had heard it before and what she had learned from those times. She had learned not to answer. She had learned that not answering was sufficient. She had built a life on this property around that single piece of knowledge, cooking eggs in the morning and watching the window and keeping the gate unlatched because something that can come down a mountain road in the dark without headlights is not deterred by a padlock. And the unlatched gate was not an invitation but a practicality. You could not lock out what came down that road. You could only decide not to answer it. Marcus sat at the table and looked at his coffee and thought about 40 years of Saturday nights in a motel at the base of that fire road. That afternoon, a deputy came by. Not in an official capacity. He had heard from someone in town that there were out-of-towners at the Presley place, and he stopped in the way that people stop in small communities where everyone's business is loosely collective. He was in his 40s, local, the kind of man who carries his authority quietly. Marcus showed him the photographs, the foundation, the chair, the tire tracks, the disturbed gravel in front of room 4. The deputy looked at each photograph for a long time. He did not ask questions while he was looking. When he handed the phone back, he looked at the slope above the motel for a moment, and then he looked at Mrs. Presley, who was watching from the office doorway. "Same thing," he said to her. Not to Marcus, to her. She nodded. He said he would file a report. He filed it. The notation in the official log reads, "Guests reported vehicle sounds and contact attempt. No vehicle or individual located on fire road or motel grounds. No further action, referred to county." In his personal notebook, not the official log. A spiral notebook he kept in his jacket pocket that came to light years later through a public records request tangentially related to something else entirely. He wrote, "Same thing. 3rd time this year. Told them not to open it. 3rd time that year." Before October 2009, in the same calendar year, 2 other sets of people had reported the same sequence at that address. The same engine on the fire road, the same absence of headlights, the same knock. The deputy had told all of them not to open it. They had not opened it, or if they had, it had not made it into any report he filed. Jerry the mechanic came Monday morning at 10, as promised. Fixed the hose in 40 minutes, charged a fair price, made no conversation beyond what was necessary. Marcus and Delia loaded the car. Mrs. Presley came out of the office to see them off, which she had not done for any of the previous guests as far as Marcus could tell. She stood on the covered walkway with her arms crossed and watched them get in the car. "Don't mention the yellow house if you stop anywhere in the county," she said. "People know the story. They don't need reminding." Marcus said what story? She said there were a few versions and none of them were good. Then she went back inside. They drove out of the county without stopping. Marcus uploaded the photographs when they got home. He had taken them on his phone, which meant they had been living on a small screen for 2 days, compressed and backlit, the details available but not studied. On a laptop screen they were larger. He went through them in order: the tire tracks, the disturbed gravel, the foundation from 4 angles, the iron chair. He almost missed it. He was on the 4th photograph of the foundation, the one taken from the entrance to the clearing looking toward the far wall, when something in the lower left corner of the frame made him stop. He had been looking at the chair, which was centered in the image the way a subject is centered when you are photographing it deliberately, and he had not been looking at the corners. He looked at the corner now. Against the interior of the far block wall, where the wall met the ground in the corner to the left of the chair, there was a shape. He enlarged the image. The shape did not resolve into clarity the way shapes sometimes do when you enlarge a photograph. It stayed at the edge of definition, the kind of detail that exists in the image without having been intended by the photographer, caught by the camera in the fraction of a second the shutter was open. Dark, low to the ground, pressed into the corner behind the wall's shadow, which was deeper there because the morning sun was coming from the right side of the clearing and the left corner was in relative shade. It was not the chair. The chair was visible in the center of the frame, clearly distinct, the iron legs and the curved back identifiable. The shape in the corner was separate from the chair and separate from the wall, and was pressed against the junction of the two in the way that something presses into a corner when it is trying to occupy as little space as possible, or when it does not want to be seen. He could not describe it with certainty. The image did not allow certainty. It was approximately the size of a crouched person. It had no features that the photograph resolved clearly enough to name. It was dark in a way that was not entirely explained by the shadow. The shadow in that corner had a texture, the rough gray-green of old concrete, and the shape was darker than the shadow behind it. A different quality of dark, the dark of something that absorbed light rather than simply being shaded from it. He had been alone in that clearing. He had walked through the entrance, crossed the interior, photographed the chair, turned and photographed the walls. He had not seen anything in that corner. He had not heard anything. He had not felt the specific awareness that comes from being in an enclosed space with another living thing. He had been alone. The shape in the corner of the photograph had been there when he was alone. He called Delia into the room and showed her the screen without saying anything, without pointing to what he had found. He wanted to know if she saw it without being directed to it. She looked at the photograph for about 10 seconds, and then she put her finger on the screen in the lower left corner, on the shape. He showed the photograph to 2 other people over the following months, neither of whom had any context for it. A friend who did not know the story, a colleague who had never heard of the place. Both of them found the shape in the corner without being told to look for it. Both of them asked what it was. He said he did not know. Both of them looked at it for a while longer, and then looked at something else and did not ask follow-up questions, which he understood. He tried to have the photograph analyzed. He found someone online who did forensic image work, authentication, enhancement, the kind of technical evaluation that can sometimes determine whether an anomaly is a camera artifact, a lens flare, a compression error, a shadow misread by the eye. The analyst looked at it and sent back a 2-paragraph response. The first paragraph described the image parameters: file size, format, compression level, the camera data embedded in the file. The second paragraph said the shape in the lower left corner was not a camera artifact, and was not a compression error, and was not a lens flare, and could not be attributed to any technical characteristic of the image or the device that produced it. The analyst said he was not able to determine what it was. He did not offer further services. Delia noticed the other detail later. Much later, years after the trip, on an evening when she had taken the external drive off the shelf for an unrelated reason and had found herself looking at the photograph again without planning to. She called Marcus over and showed him. The iron chair cast a shadow. It was subtle. The foundation had no roof. The morning had been overcast. The light in the clearing was the flat, directionless light of a cloudy October morning with no direct sun. In that kind of light, objects do not cast distinct shadows. They are simply darker on one side, if that. But the chair in the photograph had a shadow, a definite directional shadow, falling to the left of the chair's legs and base, the kind of shadow that requires a light source with an angle and a direction, a shadow that should not have been there under those sky conditions. He looked at it for a long time when she showed him. He looked at the corner of the image, at the shape pressed against the junction of the wall and the ground. Then he looked at the shadow of the chair. The shape in the corner did not cast a shadow. The overcast morning that produced no shadows had somehow produced a shadow from the iron chair, and no shadow from the shape beside it, which meant one of two things. Either the shape was not physically present in the way that a chair is physically present enough to block and redirect light, present enough to leave a mark on the ground, or the shadow logic of that clearing did not apply to it. Either the shape was not there in the way physical things are there, or it was there in a way that light passed through or ignored. He did not have a framework for either option. They had not talked about the trip publicly, not online, not with most friends, not with family. It was not a decision they made formally. They simply did not bring it up, and when it could have come up, they found reasons to redirect the conversation. And after a while, the habit of not talking about it became the default, and the default became permanent. The submission that brought this account to the person compiling it came from a mutual friend who had been told the story once, in a context that made it clear it was not meant to travel further, and who had submitted it anyway because, as they explained in the submission note, it seemed like something that should exist somewhere outside of two people's memory. They told me because they wanted someone else to know, the submission said. Not to warn people, just so it wasn't only in their heads anymore. The person who compiled this account tried to verify the location, the address on the deputy's complaint, the address that corresponded to the motel, to the fire road, to the 8-room block with the numbered doors, and the cash preference and the woman who watched the window. Shows in the current county property database as a private residence. No motel listing, no commercial use designation, no rental history in the database after 2011. Mrs. Presley's name does not appear in the county directory after 2012. The property changed hands once after that, to a buyer whose name is listed but who does not appear in any subsequent public record connected to the address, which is the kind of absence that could mean many things. The yellow house is not referenced by that name in any public document. There is no structure registered at the location above the fire road. The fire road itself appears on the county road index as an unmaintained private access track with no named destination. 3 other accounts from that county, from different years, different people, different circumstances, mention a light on a fire road behind a small property near the state route in the mountains. The light is described differently in each account. Yellow in one, white in another, described only as a glow in the third. The accounts are not included here. They exist. Marcus does not stay in roadside motels. This is not a rule he made. It is simply something that has not happened since October 2009, and when travel has made one necessary, he has found a reason to drive further to something else, a chain property, something with an interior corridor and a digital key and a front desk staffed by someone who does not watch the window. He does not examine this preference closely. It works well enough as a preference without requiring examination. Delia still has the photograph. On an external drive, in the second drawer of the desk in the room, they use as an office. In a folder, inside a folder, the way you file something you want to be able to find, but do not want to encounter accidentally. She has not looked at it deliberately in several years. She has not deleted it. She has thought about deleting it, and each time arrived at the same place, that deleting it would be a decision about what she believes, a commitment to a position on what that shape in the corner was and what it means that it was there. And she is not ready to make that decision. Keeping it is not belief. It is the suspension of a conclusion she cannot yet reach. In the corner of the fourth photograph, pressed against the wall of a roofless foundation on a fire road in the mountains of western North Carolina, the shape has been in her possession for 16 years. It has not moved. The chair beside it still casts its impossible shadow in the flat light of an overcast October morning. The shape still does not cast one, as far as she can tell.